So hello everybody, very warm welcome from Thet. My name's Amy, I work in the programmes team, and this is Audrey also, so hello to everybody. This morning we will be delivering a workshop. Well, Paula will be delivering a workshop, we will not be doing so. And this is for our UK health partnerships as a sort of an aid with a fundraising strategy to help with, of course, our partnerships that could not be funded from April. So yes, so Paula is from Charity Boost, Paula Alionita. She is the founder and a consultant at Charity Boost, so has done some amazing work, which I'm sure she'll elaborate a bit on. So hello, Paula, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Amy, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Right, so recording has started, and I'm just going to have a look at how many of us we've got. 28, brilliant. So to kick this off, my name is Paula or Paula, I don't mind, either one is fine by me. You know, most of my friends call me Paula, whichever one you really prefer. But I have worked in international development for quite some time. It's been about 7 years now. And I've worked in mostly sort of fundraising capacity, trying to raise more funds or grow the profile of the organizations that I was with. I worked in the space of disability rights, advocacy. Currently do quite a lot of work with sort of around social work and supporting young people, especially those who have lived experience of care, so living in orphanages, care homes, education, and also more and more so healthcare. I am currently working with an organization called Worldwide Radiology that work across the globe, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, to support healthcare workers with imaging and ultrasound training and access to it in all forms. Coming back to the workshop, as I said, very excited to be here and to host this workshop for all of you. It will be a very practical one. So it is going to be mostly me talking this entire time, this 1.5 hours. But I will try as much as I can to provide you with the tools and practical tips and tricks and everything you may need to help you gain a better understanding of how to build a fundraising plan. And I'm going to use very simple terminology throughout the session. How to find what you're after, how to really understand where to start and how to go about it, and how not to get too overwhelmed, which is what mostly happens with people who have not fundraised much before. So do you make notes throughout the session? I do suggest you kind of scribbling somewhere in the notebook, maybe the questions you might want to ask or any important points. Or sometimes I will be mentioning things like different sites to look at. So do make a note of that. And you know, I will mention this at the end of the session, but you are more than welcome to contact me afterwards and ask any questions you may have. It would be an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you in a bit more detail. There will also be some templates that I'll be sharing at the end of not necessarily the end of the session, but I'll send you an email after at some point, probably today. Kind of a couple of templates to give you more of a structure to work with so that you can actually start building that plan, that strategy. So I really hope that those are of use as well. And again, you know, any questions that you may have about the templates or any support you may need, again, you're more than welcome to contact me. Right, so let's kick this off. We've got a lot of content to get through. Firstly, I would love to hear a bit more about you guys and sort of who you are and you know, where you work and how you work and where you come from. So to start this off, in the chat section, if you could add sort of say yes, if you have done any fundraising in the past, any sort, grant fundraising, done a fundraising challenge of any kind where you try to raise money, or perhaps were involved in the planning of a fundraising strategy. Oh, that's brilliant. There's some of you coming through. That's great. Fantastic. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's great. So that's about a third of the participants. Different grants, but others as well. Great. Yeah, some no's coming through. Lovely. Many fundraising challenges. Brilliant. So it's a whole range from fundraising challenge from no experience to fundraising challenges, and then different grants, which is the entire scope of where fundraising could go, right? Great. So fundraising can be so many things and can mean so many things to different people. And the question usually is, when I get to speak to people who have not or who have sort of started a project or have an idea of a project, really want to go ahead with it, have the project elements in place, the main question that I get is, so where do I start? What do I do? How does it work? Sorry, let me just put the chat section down. There are so many, I'd say, limiting beliefs in some cases, but also challenges, real challenges that people have who run projects, are very involved in the programmatic area of the work. So have a very strong understanding and experience of how to deliver a sustainable and impactful project, but don't quite understand or have the experience of navigating the space of raising money. Some of it might be about not having the right skills. So perhaps you don't quite know how to, or don't enjoy networking or meeting different people, or sort of engaging in or really understanding how to start those conversations about funding a project. Quite a few people talk about not enjoying the process of asking for money. And that could sometimes be a challenge. You get everything else in place, but when it comes to actually asking for money, there's a feel of discomfort. And I think once we'll talk about that as well, the importance of actually going out there, putting yourself out there and making the ask. There is also, we live in the age of digital, and we live in the age of a lot of information being thrown at us on a daily basis. And that's very much the case when you start kind of looking for information about how to fundraise, because there is just so much out there. If you were to Google, how do I write a fundraising strategy? How do I develop a fundraising strategy? You'll see lots of different posts about digital being the most important thing, supporter journeys being the most important thing, your proposition being the most important thing. And then I can imagine that most people sit there wondering, so which one is actually the most important, and where do I actually start with all of this? There's also, there is a lot to do. There is too much to do. It feels like there's so many elements I need to put in place. How will I ever find the time to do that? And that could be, it can be a challenge. But again, I think my strategy always is about keeping to the key core elements of what do I actually need to have in place now? And then how do I develop a strong enough plan to work in different stages and continue growing and developing more and more additional resources as I go, that doesn't leave me sort of too overwhelmed, and I don't sit there with lots and lots of marketing materials and lots of opportunities, but I don't quite know how to go about it and don't have a timeline for it. So we'll discuss all of that today. But again, sort of another quick question that I really wanted to throw out there would be around the biggest challenges that you see when it comes to fundraising in your partnerships, in your organizations. What is the biggest challenge to you right now? And if you could leave those answers sort of very brief, a couple of words in the chat section, that would be very, very helpful. I can see lots of messages of people introducing themselves and who they are and where they work, which is fantastic. Yes, Kerry saying not really knowing where to look and having no one to do it. That is definitely a challenge. Getting major benefactors, so really not having really needing the doors to be opened, getting through to people. How do I actually get to speak to people? And then raising those really large grants. You know, how do you go about starting those conversations and putting your proposals in? Finding donors that fit your objectives. Yes, absolutely. How do you find organizations, grant makers that have the funding focus that meets what you're trying to achieve? Opening doors is often the challenge, Julia says. Building relationships takes time. Absolutely. Cultivation in major donor fundraising, individual sort of, high level fundraising, but also in grant fundraising takes a very long time. Sometimes, the benchmark that I've heard is sort of 1 to 2 years of cultivation before you can actually make the ask. No resources within the organization to grow it other than volunteer trustees who have full-time jobs. Absolutely. Also a huge challenge for people to find the time to sit down and actually deliver this work. Julie also says there's a mix of fundraising. Some relies on relationships and others just want a submission with no relationship building. Yes, it's navigating the different funders and understanding what they actually want from you. Could also definitely be a challenge. Sophie says, so many projects to fundraise for and only one fundraiser. I really feel your pain, Sophie. I've, having been in this space for a long time, working with smaller organizations, trying to raise a huge amount of money, being a sole fundraiser is very difficult, and to keep the morale up sometimes is very hard. Great, thank you so much. This has given me quite a bit of insight, so thank you for that. Right, let's move to the practical bit of the workshop. So the way I wanted to lay out sort of the workshop and the materials that to share with you, partly because I know that most of you are coming from very different angles. You might be in very different stages of fundraising. Some of you with no experience at all, others with quite a bit of experience, fundraising in the past. I want you to be able to take away lots of practical tools and tips. And some of this may not be applicable to you. Some of this you may have done already, which is fantastic. Take that off and move on to the next stage. But really, what I want to focus on is the 6 steps to success. So 6 elements that we need to put in place in order for the fundraising program to be solid, full, and ready to go. And I think that if any of the 6 elements are missing, in my experience, you really can't move forward, and you're not quite ready to submit those big proposals and get those big grants in place, or not necessarily big grants, but really start fundraising or putting your organization out there and be able to communicate your work well enough, have a solid plan so that machine keeps running. That fundraising plan is sort of, you're meeting your targets, you have your timelines, you know what you're doing, and the money keeps coming in. So 6 steps to success. We'll talk about all 6 of them today. The first one is create a case for support. I'm a true believer in, I need to understand, if I was a grant maker, I really need to understand what you need the support for. What is it that you actually do? What do you need help with? And sort of putting that in some kind of a, it doesn't have to be a document, but it could be a Word document where you write down who you are, what you do, why it's important, and what you're trying to achieve, and why you're the best organization, best place to do this work, and so on. The step number 2 would be mapping your opportunity. So really understanding what is it that's out there that you could tap into to raise money? What are the networks available to you? What are the different audiences that you could engage with? The third step would be to develop a structure. It's building some kind of a skeleton of what your fundraising would actually look like. How many income streams would it have? Would it just be grants, or do you want to include a mix of challenge events? Do you know what your strengths are? Do you know what your weaknesses are? Do you know how much money you need to raise? What's your budget like? What's a mix of your budget? Is it just programmatic activities, or have you added your admin costs? Have you added costs for marketing? Having all of that structure and sort of adding an element of a mechanism for giving is also very important. So all of those different elements create a structure for fundraising. Research and developing a timeline also is very important. Without having a timeline of when you're going to get things done, is not much of a plan, really. Only having the deadlines and understanding what you're going to do and what you're trying to achieve is going to get you to that goal in the end. But also research is absolutely vital before you start engaging with donors. Without the research, you may be spending lots of time putting in proposals where the funder doesn't actually fund this type of work, or might have stopped funding this type of work, or actually, maybe talking about the fact that they support organizations like you, but if you look at their annual accounts, they have their preferred free organizations, partnerships that they fund, and they might not have funded anyone else in the past 3-4 years, in which case it might not be the best opportunity for you. So really doing that research, doing that desktop research where you sit down and you find everything you possibly can about each opportunity, each grant maker, is very, very important. Step number 5 would be tailoring your proposal. So once you have all the first 4 elements in place, you really need to think about, how do I write my proposal in a compelling way that it fits the interests of the funder? And that doesn't mean that you have to push yourself into a very small frame as to what the funder is interested in funding, but more so, if your opportunities are good enough, you want to tailor how you talk about that work to the audience that you're planning to approach. And number 6 would be to actually start asking. And I did want to include that as a separate step, just because I see so many organizations and fundraisers who work so hard in getting so many things done and so many things in place and all these plans and timelines, and everything's color coded and ready to go. But when it comes to sending those emails or making those phone calls, they keep on getting postponed because there are so many other things that they think they need to get done before that happens. So step number 6 is definitely start asking. And then how do you actually go about doing that? Right. So creating a case for support, and what does that actually look like? Your case for support is your pitch, and it's how you sell your idea of your project or your partnership, your organization. It's essentially a document that explains the background of your partnership or of your project, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. It will include your short-term, long-term goals. So also to give sort of an indication as to not just we're trying to support X number of healthcare workers in, let's say, Ghana, but what are the different elements of that project that you're putting in place, that you're trying to achieve? What is going to be the impact of each one of them? And have you really thought through as to how you're going to get there? What's your timeline? What are the first things that you're planning to do? And then what sort of the long-term goal that you may have in place, and listing all of that in a very clear way, and sort of almost a very visual way of getting the reader to understand what you're trying to do and why that's important is vital. But also, having a document that's less kind of a grant proposal project plan, but more a very, using simple language, explaining your project and what you're actually trying to do. There are a lot of project write-ups and partnership write-ups that I get to read. And you may have noticed already, English is not my first language. And what I tend to say to them, well, I've just read this, got bored on sentence number 2, and I don't quite understand what you're trying to do. So really trying to find the right words in a very simple way to explain what you're trying to do, what the problem may be, what is it that you're trying, what problem are you trying to solve? Why are you trying to solve this problem? Also, very importantly, why are you the best place to do this work? Why you? Why not another organization? What makes you the best organization to deliver this work? You are asking, this case for support is really, I want to receive a grant from you. This is what I'm trying to do. This is how, by working together with me, investing in this work, together we will achieve this. We will have this impact. And the impacts that you talk about in your case for support also, very importantly, it has to be about the people. It has to be not about just strengthening your organization or strengthening systems, but how does that then benefit what's the end result? How is that benefiting the individuals, the general public, let's say? There's a saying in fundraising, people don't give to organizations, people give to people. And I think that's very important. Sometimes we forget that, because if you're applying for a large grant and you're approaching a grant-making organization, and you're also an organization partnering with another organization, it does seem like you're an organization presenting an organization to another organization. But really, you are a group of people trying to do some good that will also benefit other people. And that should be the focus around how you phrase it, the language that you use to talk about the work. You're not just increasing healthcare capacity in a country, you're supporting patients, you're improving patient care, and the end benefit is an individual, and putting that individual at the core of your project, at the core of how you explain what you're trying to do. Therefore, your case for support is very important, and that will give any funder, be it an individual or a grant-making organization, a much stronger indication that you understand what you're doing. You're not just doing a project and sort of leaving. You're really thinking about the wider scope of your work and how it impacts the society that you're working in. So the key information, if I was to sort of structure it a little bit in terms of developing the case for support and the different elements, the key elements would be your problem. So lay out the context, use some statistics if you can, don't overwhelm yourself with using a lot of research, but back it up with a couple of bits of data as to why that may be a problem. For example, through my work with Worldwide Radiology, I noticed that we when we lay out the problem, we would talk about things like, in the country where we work, there's a shortage of radiologists or radiographers, and we would then use the data as to how many there are for this many people in the country. That would give you a good indication to understand, actually, let's say there are only 2 radiologists. This is just an example, 2 radiologists in Malawi versus 70 radiologists in the UK. That gives you a much better visual indication as to the difference. And also, if you can add things like the size of the population, the percentage of the population that has access to a radiologist and things like that. So again, be creative. It doesn't have to be very sort of academic textbook. Obviously, the sources have to be legit. But think about the an interesting visual way to present the issue that you're trying to solve. Use things like, or talk about things like who you are. So, your organization, how long you may have been around, or a group of individuals, how you're partnering, what's the setup of the partnership, what you do, what are the, you may have many different projects in place. What's the common ground for all of those projects? What's the common theme of the impact you're trying to have? Where do you work? If your case for support, and you may want to have a case for support for each of your projects, I would suggest firstly to start with one that is about the partnership as a whole. But where do you work? Do you work in many different countries? Do you just work in one country? And if so, what are the different areas of the country you work in? Give some context as to impact that your work has, and be open and honest about it. It's grant makers usually spot these things straight away, but it's quite important if you are only working in sort of a couple of small locations in the country, and the impact doesn't really stretch on to the national level. Talk about that. Maybe that's one of your goals. Maybe you're saying, we're doing this project right now. In the next 5 years, we want to have a sort of a national, have more of a national impact. But don't say that the impact you have is on a national level, when in reality it's not, and therefore you don't want to provide the information on the locations you work with. That would just not be unfair. That wouldn't be very fair. And also the grant makers usually ask those questions, so they would read through the case for support and think, actually there's not enough information about where they work, so I don't quite understand. So detail is very important. As I mentioned before, why are you the best place to do this work? And it's a hard question to answer sometimes. I get a lot of, I don't know, I just, we think it's an issue. But really, most people that start these projects, that want to, that form these partnerships, are very knowledgeable of the subject, very experienced in this area of work, so they could talk about the issues, the context, the different kind of issues around different relationships, or how things are not working, how they could be improved, and who could improve that, and how much it might cost. Talk about the experience you have, and also, especially when it comes to partnerships, partnering, two different organizations partnering, talk about what each of the partners brings to that partnership to form a very strong alliance and to have a bigger impact together. I think collaboration and partnerships are a very partnership way of working, is a very beautiful way of making change and creating impact, and focusing on that in your case for support would come across quite well to a funder if you're able to verbalize, your work together, your collaboration. So these would be, and lastly, what you need. So, sometimes we end up talking about ourselves, and what we're trying to do and what this project is and all the different activities. What do you need from the funder? And if it's a case for support, general for the entire partnership, entire organization, you probably don't want to add the numbers straight away. You don't want to say we need, £20,000, £200,000 in the next 3 years, but you may want to talk about where you're going, and do choose, you may want to say, well, we'll create a case for support for this is our case for support for this strategic period, which may be the next 3 years. You may want to talk about where you're trying to take the organization. What are the key milestones you're trying to reach? And then how could that then be supported by a grant maker, by a funder? You may straight away say to me, well, I just want them to give me the money. We'll reach the milestones if they give us this grant, or this individual makes a major donor donation. There is a lot more that they could do. Think about your organization and the growth of your organization. What are the other things that you might be paying for right now that they could provide? Think about your digital presence, and especially now with not so much with home working, because with partnerships, global partnerships, it's always been the case that you need things like your Zoom license, could they give you a Zoom license for free? Could they give you access to a paid funding database, or they could pay for your funding database as part of giving you a grant, right? So they would not only fund the project or the partnership, but they would also help you as an organization develop more opportunities to raise more money. Think about all the different things that they could support you with that are not just about that big grant for project activities. Could they help you host your website if you want to have one or have one already? Could they help you with social media presence? They might have a network, a big network of volunteers in place who are ready to do this work. Could they help you develop some marketing materials that could help you, again, fundraise or achieve even some of your project objectives, especially if there are elements of training and training or advocacy work where you have to sort of, have printout materials that would normally cost you quite a bit of money. Could they relieve you from some of that administrative work? And that would be much more interesting for the funder to get involved with when they know you have thought all of these things through, and it's not just a grant that they're going to give you. There are lots of additional elements that you could add in to bring a lot more color into your case for support. Think about the impact data. And I know it's hard if you have just started this project and you don't quite have anything to share really, because you haven't really achieved anything yet. But in that case, talk about the things you are planning to achieve and visualize them. Maybe there's a graph or a small infographic you could put together, and there are plenty of tools out there right now that you can use. And I know time is definitely an issue, and we'll talk about the resources. But find ways around it. Ask someone who may know how to do this. It might take them 5 minutes. Draft on an A4 sheet of paper. I would like to visualize what we're trying to do in this way. Draft a little bit of a timeline and ask maybe someone even in your family, could you put this together? I use an amazing tool, and I've used it for this presentation as well, called Canva. I use that on a daily basis to design pretty much everything, including all the printout materials and impact reports and case for supports and so on, which is a drag and drop tool. And I know some people might find it difficult to use, but quite a few people out there, especially those in communications and marketing, know how to use that. Also, we'll discuss, looking for, it's called Canva. I'll write it in the chat. It is free for nonprofits as well. Canva, there you go. When you subscribe, they usually give you a month of free premium subscription. And then if you email the team, they will give you a charity license free of charge for up to 10 users. And you can create graphs, and it's sort of a graphic design online platform that's very easy to use. It's all drag and drop. So definitely have a look at that. Case studies is very important, especially, again, as I said, bringing that beneficiary closer to what are we trying to, how are we trying to benefit? What's the end? How are we trying to benefit the end? What's the end result of this work? Who is going to benefit? And then how do we tease out those stories of how it could change someone's life? I mean, it could, and in most cases it does. Sometimes it saves lives, especially with health partnerships. I am sometimes concerned about, the different situations in which we use words like save a child's life, especially when it comes to, international development and working with children. And I think most people sometimes wonder whether that is the case. And how did we get to that conclusion when we say we might save we will save a child's life? But I think when it comes to healthcare, thinking about things like, how is this benefiting a patient, let's say, and then what is a case study that you could put forward to showcase that work? Again, if you have just started and you don't really have case studies of success, let's say, or stories of change, as I call them sometimes, again, not an absolute, not a huge issue, but what you probably want to do is look at what are the issues that patients might be dealing with, and could you have a case study on the problem rather than of how it changed someone's life. You could say, ex-patient, let's say a woman is pregnant and she doesn't have access to kind of maybe the support that she might need, or advice that she might need, guidance through her pregnancy. And if she was to have this guidance, she would be able to do X, Y, Z. And you may even be able to get a quote, also very important, from that woman to say, actually, I would really benefit from this because it would allow me, or would give me, peace of mind, or allow me to do X, Y, Z, or feel like I'm, whatever it may be. But bringing the voice of the beneficiary to the forefront of your work, very important. Audrey says, some donors only accept limited number of words. Is it allowed to include a separate attachment, especially if it's a success story? Yeah, sometimes it's difficult, but when you have a case study, try to shorten it as much as you can. I usually try to get kind of a long version of a case study, and then quotes are very, very impactful. So if you don't have much space, try to give a very brief rundown of who this person that you spoke to, this beneficiary, is, and then add a couple of sentences on what they said. I think when it comes from the beneficiary themselves, it's a lot more impactful than you saying, this woman received this and this and that. It's the impact, is being shared by her as a beneficiary, and it's coming straight from her. But yes, the limits on numbers, it's usually ends up being the use of language and how to get sort of say the same thing in as few words as possible. It's definitely a challenge. Photos, again, I am in marketing, so I'm quite biased in that sense, but I think photography is very powerful, and a photo sometimes could tell a bigger, a much richer story than 1,000 words written in a proposal. I know that in some situations it may be difficult to get photos, but it is definitely doable. Finding a photographer is not very difficult, especially in this day and age. They're all online. Google photographers in the country that you work in the city you work in. I'm sure you'll find plenty. Most of these photographers will be advertising themselves because they work not only with different NGOs, but will work as wedding photographers and so on. They will advertise themselves as a photographer for any project, and so you can definitely find them, and they're usually not expensive, because the local rates, again, obviously depends where you are, but find a professional photographer local who can travel to the location of your work. And may I just say, do make sure that before you take photos, you get consent from the people that you're going to be taking photography of, and be very explicit as to where you're going to use those photos. And for that, do create a media form, of which there are plenty online, where you explain what they are consenting to, so that you will take their photo and this is where you're going to use it, and add as much information about your partnership, your organization as you can, and make sure that they actually understand what they're agreeing to, and that they can retract that consent at any point. It is very important not to having that understanding and that relationship with the people you work with, and involving them in the work rather than in any shape or form taking advantage of their situation, it is just not very ethical. So it's very important that those media forms are there, and you record the consent. Yes, photography will always tell an amazing story. I could go on and on about the different ways in which you could take photos, but I would say action shots focus not on people standing there after a conference, we get so many of those. Try to take and have a briefing call with the photographer before they go out there, but ask them to take shots of action of the work in progress. What if your project is about providing training, get them to take photos of the training being delivered, action shots, people smiling, exciting faces, right? If it's about providing patient care, could you take photos of a hospital room and patient being cared for, provided some kind of care treatment, so on. If it's about building a network of medical professionals in a particular area, could you get lots of photos of not just them standing all together, but communicating, talking, sharing, laughing, action shots that tell a story. Ali saying, I have had some experience in assessing bid applications for project funding. Applicants do often provide supporting material and appendices. In most cases, we don't spend time reading them, just perhaps a skim view of the photos. Great. I mean, I understand. And sometimes if there is a lot of information to go through, funders aren't necessarily going to go through everything. And I think that's why bringing the key elements to the forefront is very important, but photography will help you with that. Right. And then in terms of the format, as I said, your case for support could be in a format of a PDF. It could be a web page if you have a website, or you have a profile on another type of website where you sort of, you're introducing your partnership. You could either have the full case for support there, or you could have elements of it. And the beauty of your case for support, use that as your information sheet with everything you may ever need in one place. And usually what you want to do is take different elements of your case for support and use it depending on what you're trying to achieve. Whether it's a just giving page you're creating to do a challenge event, whether it's a grant proposal that you're writing, and you could take an element of the problem or who you are just to kick it off, and then you might want to tailor it a bit more. Impact data, case studies, all of those can be taken and put on your social media, so really once you have and that's why I'm taking so long to talk about it, the case for support is absolutely at the core of everything. Once you have that ready, everything else will be much easier because you have done the sort of the foundational work for it. Kerry says, do you use a business model canvas at all, or is it too dry? You could. Yeah, I think you absolutely could. I mean, your case for support really is your pitch, right? So it's like pitching a business, you're pitching a partnership, you're pitching a project. So I would say you can make any business proposal, kind of business model canvas. You can make it a lot more exciting with the additional elements. And if you don't know where to start, it's better to write the dry version and then make it a bit more exciting than to sit there with a blank sheet of paper and not knowing what to write. And that's usually what I try and do. I'll get my programs team to write all the dry stuff, and then I have all my key elements, and then I can start working on how to make it sound a bit more exciting, shorten sentences, use simpler language and things like that. Right, moving on. So step number 2 would be map your opportunities. This is all about how to make the most out of the opportunities you already have in place, the networks you may have in place. Who do you know already that you could reach out to? Who are the key stakeholders of your partnership linked to? What are the networks that your work is involved in, connected to, has relationships with? And sometimes it's very difficult to think of any. And in those situations, and it's definitely a process, but the easiest way to go about it, I would say, would be to sort of create this spider diagram type of thing where you list the core partners and then think of what other organizations or networks are they linked to, and list all of those. And it could be a network of medical professionals in a particular field. It could be a government advisory panel of sorts in country. And I'm talking about it, the countries where the programs are based. You could have regional teams that are or advocacy teams. It could be a group of government officials or one government official that you have a relationship with already, that you're connected to, and they have access to someone else. Think of national, regional bodies that work in the space that you work in. Also come back to the UK and think if there's a board of trustees, board of directors, founder, directors, who is linked to any organizations, any networks, any individuals who might be interested in this work, already work in the space and could help you in some way. This is not just thinking about who could give me the money. It's thinking, who are the key relationships that could help me find the opportunities, the funding opportunities, not just the funding calls, but how could I get through to the people that I want to speak to, the key grant makers, the key, it might be another organization working in the space, a much bigger organization that's a peer of yours, right? Works in the same space, does a lot more work. How could you speak to them and get more of an insight as to who are they connected to? That could be helpful to me. So I hope that makes sense, but really building that understanding of what is the space that you work in. And I will use the example of Worldwide Radiology again. I really hope they don't mind. Worldwide Radiology was started here in the UK by Dr. Elizabeth Yorkes, and she's a radiologist herself, and she's based in, the organization's based in Liverpool, and she's connected to the medical community there. She has also done a lot of presentations with a number of universities in the UK. So she's very connected with medical students in the UK as well. She has also had, she has worked for sort of a part of her life in Ghana, and therefore is connected with the medical community there. But also the projects that we deliver, the teams that we work with, the medical professionals, the doctors that we then support and train, they have their own networks of medical professionals in Ghana that they're connected with. So this is how you start building the network. You're thinking, who am I working with? And could I even, your beneficiaries are also your stakeholders. So think about, can I involve my beneficiaries in the process of getting me to build my network or open doors? And the idea about mapping opportunities is all about efficiency and effectiveness. How can you raise the most money in the most efficient and effective way? And usually that is because of the lack of resources, the lack of knowledge, and the lack of time you have to fundraise. How do I make the most of the time that I have? How do I not just make random shots at everything, but have a cohesive strategic plan as to how I'm going to get to where I want to get to? I really love the matrix on the left side, the sort of impact versus effort. I think when you think about your fundraising plan, it's really important to think, firstly, so the kind of the first two at the top, quick wins versus strategic initiatives. Your quick wins are high impact, but sort of low effort. So these could be, if you want to kind of start thinking about your income streams and your mix, what are the quick wins? Are there any funding calls already that you could sort of tap into and get, £5,000 here and £10,000 there? Or, those that sort of your objectives are closely aligned and you can see you have your case for support ready, so you could literally just submit that proposal tomorrow. Also, are there any medical professionals or volunteers or anyone who constantly messages you and goes, I want to help, how can I help? Could they do a challenge? Could they put together a just giving page, a fundraising page together and start raising that money? Could that be a quick win? But also think, what are my what are the strategy initiatives that I'm taking? What are the big wins that I need to develop and work on over time? One of you has said previously about the sort of the cultivation process, the time it takes to build up that relationship, to bring it to the right level. There will be situations with bigger grant makers where they will say to you, you will arrange that call, you'll sit down with them, you'll have that coffee, you'll talk about the project, and they will say to you, I believe in this work. It's a great partnership. I see what you're trying to do, but I need you to get to this stage, and then we can talk about funding. So it sometimes might be very frustrating to have to wait, but all of this is a part of relationship building trust, building confidence, because they need to see that you're able and willing to go through the process of achieving all your small milestones to get to the big goals. And also they are in that way building their confidence in you as an organization, as a partnership that delivers that work, and that actually, that work actually has an impact. So it all takes time, but think about how to have a good mix of that. But also looking at the sort of the lower level of the day-to-day stuff, the stuff that doesn't really have much of not much of it. It has an impact, but it's not as huge, but also doesn't require that much effort. And these would be things like updating your website, or, posting on social media if you have a social media presence. Or this could be, you may have a Just Giving page already, or I keep on saying Just Giving, it could be any fundraising platform. Updating those. This could be sending an email to your audience. So you may have, it could be 50 if you're a smaller organization, could be 50 individuals that said, you know what, I really want to hear about this work. I want to be on your mailing list. You might want to send them a monthly email to give them a quick update on all the things you're doing and how your project and partnership is going. What are those day-to-day things that you could be doing that don't require too much effort? It doesn't, these things don't require too much effort, but they eventually materialize into some kind of either door opening opportunities, or at least, if anything, brand awareness, if it doesn't actually materialize into financial support. And also trying to avoid money pits as much as you can. So you don't want to put too much effort into something that doesn't yield much of an impact. This may sound controversial, but I am seeing quite a few new fundraising platforms opening up, and some of them are, just launching now. And the idea behind them is to bring corporates together, or high-value individuals, so your sort of philanthropy network, with charitable organizations. And the way they pitch the idea is very exciting, because as a charity you get to advertise on their site, and it's free of charge, and they will help you fundraise for your project. But unless you have your case for support ready and your core elements in place, sometimes you may spend loads and loads of time advertising on that site, where in reality the number of people that you'll be able to access with all of that effort that you've put in isn't necessarily as high at this stage, because they've just launched. So it's really worth thinking through, is this the best way of spending my time? Is this going to be effective? And maybe having that genuine conversation with the person responsible for the platform that you might want to sign up for, to use. And especially if you're planning to spend any money, just think, is this a money pit? Am I going to put a lot of effort in this and not get much out of it? Or, is this really worthwhile? Yes, and sort of, again, mapping your opportunities is about not just grant makers as trusts, but also, individuals. Look at the, philanthropic networks, look at who are the individuals, kind of who could be the best ambassadors for your work, and who could be those key door openers to help you talk about your work from someone who's sort of external, representing your work and really helping you open those doors and bring those people together and help you form those conversations, or sort of bring together those opportunities to even have conversations with different funders. But also, who are the major donors who could give you the support, who are interested in doing something like this, in supporting work like this. Think about your corporates. Who are the businesses that might be in this space where, corporate funding is a sort of a beast in itself. But could you approach a corporate foundation for a grant? if they have a corporate giving program or a sort of corporate social responsibility program. It's not just about, there's so many things you could do with corporates. You know, it's not just about employee engagement. They might be giving corporate grants, but they might also be forming partnerships with charities. And partnerships are all about mutual benefit. You know, how would it be worthwhile for that corporate to form a partnership with you, to give you money and maybe other elements to support other elements of your partnership, of your work? But what would then they be getting in return? And how would that then work as a partnership, as you partnering together? One of the examples could be that, especially in healthcare settings, if you are providing access to healthcare and there are tangible items, medical equipment that you need to deliver or provide as part of your project, you may want to look at partnering with medical equipment companies and have those conversations with them to say, help us provide this equipment as part of our project. And also you might want to make a grant on top of that as a way of partnering together. And then sort of you could, you know, talk about that work as if, you know, you're doing all of that together, right? As a partnership. That's just one of the examples. There are so many. Again, there are many companies that provide pro bono support. So again, when it comes to sort of, it can be absolutely anything, really. It could not necessarily even be related to the project itself. It could be related to the partnership or the organization. If you're trying to grow the partnership and you need administrative support, other organizations that could help you with that and cover the costs. And you know, I gave you the example of Canva, but really that is, you know, Canva is a business and they have a charitable program. So when you apply for your free membership, you're partnering with Canva essentially. So many ways to look at that, but think of what you're trying to achieve and what type of partnerships will work for you. But don't forget that these things, again, we're getting close to talking about that, you know, shortly, but the resources required, how much time would that take? And how do I simplify the ask? How do I not make it too overwhelming for myself and for the donor, that the funder that I'm trying to reach? Right, the next element is developing a structure. Lots to talk about here, but we just to say that all of these elements will be added or are added for you and ready to go in a template. So I have put together a fundraising plan template, which I'm going to share with you later. And that includes all of these different elements, like your SWOT analysis, your budget, income streams, and developing all of those with some guidance as to how to go about it. So really after this workshop, you can sort of take that plan and start drafting and thinking about how to sort of put everything together. But when developing a structure, I would say, and again, you don't have to sit there the whole day thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, but think about from the fundraising perspective, what are your strengths? What are the elements that you think, actually, I really know how to do this well, or I already have access to this, or I have experience of bid writing, or I have a strong social media presence, whatever it may be, or a strong network. I may have access to a number of volunteers who can help me. What are the strengths you have? What are the weaknesses? Where do you need to invest a bit more time, money, resources to have a bigger impact? What are the opportunities that you need to explore? What are the networks you may not have tapped into yet? What are the threats before you even begin? What are the things you need to constantly monitor and think about that could be an issue? Sounds very dull and very sort of project management type of approach, but it makes a massive difference and really helps you start thinking about how to develop it. Think about your budget, not just the project budget, the budget for your organization / partnership. What are your costs? What are the different things that you want to do? How much does it cost? Not necessarily just in terms of achieving your again, project activities, delivering training, supporting, building, community advocating, providing medical equipment, and so on. But more, what do you have any costs in the UK? Would it be helpful for you to have a web page or a website or social media presence? Would it be helpful for you to get a consultant to help you develop your case for support because you don't have the resources how to, or need someone external to guide you, or get a consultant to submit your funding proposals? How much would that cost? And be very open and realistic about setting those budgets with all the costs involved, not just the core project activities. And I know that most of you will make a comment and say, yes, I know what you're saying, but most funders will not fund that. I completely get that. But I will also say that a lot of funders are now explicitly on their websites, because I have just done quite a bit of research on grant-making trusts. A lot of them are starting to talk more and more about the importance of supporting administrative costs, the importance of supporting the growth of the organization, the importance of professional development or building your team, growing your team, developing your skills, kind of strengthening the impact that the organization can have by having more resources on actually sitting back and being able, or having the time to think about the project and the best approach, rather than just having the money just to deliver the activities and that's it. Sustainable development is a big conversation, and it's becoming more and more of a conversation between different grant makers. So it's very important to be realistic and be open about the things that you need money for. Income streams, you need to develop a mix. It's very similar to investing. It's you know what they say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So you need to diversify, and all the fundraisers for the last couple of years all they've been talking about was diversify your income streams. It's think about a mix, don't just focus, obviously depending on the type of organization you are, focus on a mix of large grants and smaller grants. You may, if you have the capacity or have the understanding or experience of individual fundraising, what does that look like? Are you just doing challenge events, or could you do an annual appeal? Could you run a challenge event in summer, let's say, and then approach the same group of individuals around Christmas time to ask them for a donation towards an appeal, which most likely would be a bit more cost effective to you, because you wouldn't have to sort of incur the costs of the challenge event. Again, it depends on the situation. But what's the best mix of income streams that you could have? Yeah, Julia says, I agree with diversifying. It's very important. You don't just because, and we have seen in the last 2 years, things change very rapidly in the fundraising space, and you constantly have to sort of learn more and more, and because things are changing, new things are coming in, and sort of the trends are changing in terms of what's being funded and how, and the interests of different funders. Try to diversify as much as you can and have a good mix. Your strongest income stream would be the one where you either have experience, or you think actually our network is strong enough for us to be able to raise money there, and that your strengths and weaknesses, your SWOT analysis will help you do that. That's what's sort of the first item on the list. And then think of, do I go, grants is my key income stream, but then I will do some community activities, and then I will also tap into my network of high net worth individuals, my major donors. And then what does that look like? What's the timeline like in terms of what's the plan? What do I need to do in order to get all those things in place? Setting the objectives, which is the next item on the list. So once you know the kind of the distribution of the different income streams, what are you trying to achieve? It is about how much you want to raise, but also, how and what does that look like? Do you want to secure lots of small grants, or just one or two big ones? And as you will know, with bigger grants, the bigger the grant, the more restricted it is. At least from my experience, you have to really list each and every project activity, and then you have to report to the donor in a lot more detail as to where you spent the money and what impact it's having. With smaller grants, it's less so the case. The smaller the amount, the looser the arrangement in most cases. With your small trusts and foundations, you may get a grant of £5,000 for an unrestricted grant, meaning use the money wherever your need, wherever the need is greatest. What does that mix look for you? Also, again, brand awareness. Do you need help with that? Are you trying to achieve anything to do with the growth of your partnership, the exposure of the partnership, especially for projects that have an element of advocacy and perhaps working with the government, on a national government or regional government or even local government? Do you need to grow the kind of your brand, the awareness of this partnership? By brand, I don't mean knowing your logo as this organization, but even the partnership. Who are the key people that you need to reach out to so that they know what you do and what you're trying to achieve? And could that also be as an objective for your fundraising strategy? Because fundraising and marketing just go together so well, and you really can't do one without the other, especially as a charitable organization or a partnership. Digital presence, do you have one and do you need one? You don't have to have one. Don't spend too much time on digital if you have so much money that you need to fundraise this year, right? Again, digital is important, brand awareness is important, having a way to update the people that give you money, absolutely vital. But that's not where you're not going to raise a lot of money through digital straight away. My experience, I might be biased in a sense because I mainly work with smaller organizations. I think to use it as a way to update people on the work that's going on the milestones you're reaching, new projects, new partnerships you're launching. But things like, unless you already have a community that you're speaking to, let's say on Facebook, you could say, run a Facebook fundraiser for us. By the way, if you have a fundraising page, you can use fundraising Facebook nonprofit tools, which is essentially on Facebook, registering your nonprofit as a nonprofit that Facebook then recognizes. And what that will give you is a different layout of your page, and you'll have a button, donate button, and then you'll have the option to allow people to create a fundraiser for you on Facebook, so that the money then goes straight into your into one of the partners, whoever is sort of decides to be the partner that's a registered organization, registered charity. Think of all of that. Think about, do you need a Just Giving page, or, Enthuse or Global Giving? There are many platforms out there. I'll just put the names there. Just Giving is the most sort of well-known one, but there's a new one coming up quite big now, Enthuse. And then there's also Global Giving, which is a lot more global. There's lots of organizations from all across the world. Think about whether you need to have a presence there, whether that would benefit you. There are lots of organizations that are kind of briefly mentioned. One of them would be Manch. No worries, Julia. Pleasure to have you here. It's recorded, so you can catch up sort of where you left off some other time. There are websites where you can again post your projects and attract donors that are growing and developing. And one of the examples would be Manch. I've just written a name in the name of the website in the chat section that you could check out, sort of that match different projects with different funders. But again, whether that's your as I call it, cash cow, I doubt that. It takes time. Mechanisms of giving, very much about, do you have a way for people to make donations? Nigel saying Facebook experience has been really awful. It's hard. I know. I had to set it up for a couple of organizations, and they usually take absolute ages, and sometimes it doesn't work, and their approval process is really complicated. Worth giving it a try. If you have a moment, give it a try. But again, as I said, think of, if you don't have volunteers to help you, and if you're just doing it yourself, is that the best use of our time, and how much do you think you could get out of it? As I said, unless you have, 5 people knocking on your door constantly going, I want to do a Facebook fundraiser for you, why is there no way for me to do this? Go ahead. But if you really don't have the time, either ask someone else to help you, or maybe put it on the back burner for now. So coming back to mechanisms of giving, is there a way for people to make a donation? Do you have a donation page, a fundraising page? This does not mean you have to create a website and integrate all these complicated forms. You can get people to make donations to you through just giving, and Enthuse and Global Giving do the same thing. They even allow regular donations. And currently also are now changing the model. You will see more and more to give you the charity checkout page, which is essentially your own customizable donation form. And I don't think you need to pay for that, from what I remember. I think the starter level, at least on Just Giving, is free of charge. And then additionally, developing a structure is all about the resources. As I said, who do you need to have in place in order to do this work? Is it just you? And if so, can you find volunteers to help you? And I will say that now is a good time to start looking for volunteers who have a bit of experience in fundraising. My personal opinion would be that you do need to manage expectations when you're looking for volunteers to fundraise for you. I think setting things like fundraising targets and expecting people to raise money for you when they're not actually employed to do the work, especially if they have some experience in it, might not be the best way about it, but you can definitely set some expectations around the things you would like them to help you with. I will say there are quite a few fundraisers out there who have been unfortunately made redundant last year during the whole kind of the lockdown periods, and the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted quite a few charities, and they had to cut budgets. So there are lots of fundraisers who are looking for volunteering opportunities to make sure that their skills are not going to waste. So do have a look at platforms like Reach Volunteering. I'm just putting the name in the chat section. And you can advertise your posts for volunteers on that platform there. There are also Facebook groups. One of them would be Fundraising Chat, which is a group for fundraisers on Facebook, but you could message them to ask if it would be okay for you to advertise, or whether they have a way to advertise for volunteering opportunities. And then there's another one called Charity Connect, where you can do, this Fundraising Chat is a Facebook group. Charity Connect is a website in itself. And it's managed by Charity Job, which is a charity recruitment agency. There's another Facebook group, which is, I love it. It's great. It's called Small International Development Charities Network. Quite long. But it's a fantastic group for small charities, smaller international partnerships, to talk about everything and anything, from legal, opening a bank account, registering, laws in different countries, to fundraising, social media, website. Sometimes they post things like funding calls. For smaller organizations, they might post things like different companies offering pro bono support and things like that. So definitely check them out. Right, moving on to research and development, developing a timeline. So research, again, once you develop a better understanding of the network you're working with, who do you have access to? Maybe you have thought through very well the different income streams you want to have in place. I want to focus on grants and some major donors, let's say, or grants and I have access to a good corporate network that might be able to help me. This is the time to really start doing the research. And what I mean by research is nothing overly complicated. It's sitting at your desk, creating an Excel spreadsheet with all of your opportunities, with all of the names of different people, different individuals, different trusts, and Googling it. And it's really as much as you can find about each funder. Who have they funded in the past? How much have they given? If they don't list all their grants, look at how many organizations they funded and how much the amount that they funded, and calculate the average grant size to have a better indication. Look at whether any of their grants are very restricted, or sometimes they might make unrestricted donations. Again, some of this data is not always available, but in some cases it is. Sometimes they have a website and openly talk about how they give and what they give to. You will see more and more, unfortunately, because of COVID and last year, many funders will say to you, we have stopped the application process and we're not accepting any new proposals at the moment because of the situation, and check back in, I don't know, January 2022, in which case you want to make a note to check back. They might also say things like, our trustees are actively looking for new opportunities and therefore do not accept unsolicited proposals, in which case you don't just take them off the list. You think to yourself, do I have anyone else who could introduce me to this organization? Is anyone linked to this organization? Do we know anyone who knows someone there that they could introduce us to? Because tapping into an organization like that sort of usually has a set number of partnerships, projects that they fund, and they stick to that for a long time, would be amazing. If you could get a multi-year grant, that would have your funding secured, for quite some time, and have you a bit more stable as an organization, as a partnership. And look for your, what's your kind of smaller fish to fry? What are your family trusts? Are there any family trusts that could help you, that are interested in healthcare provision, healthcare access, in the developing, well, as they call it, developing countries, developing world? Are there any local community groups that are interested in work like this that you could find? Are there any philanthropy networks? Most importantly, more and more so, what's the regional funding situation like? Are there any funders that would support a project that's not necessarily being proposed to them from the UK, but more proposed to them from the grounds, from the country where it's being delivered? Is there any regional funding available? And there are quite a few different websites, different sites that you can look at. Some of you that have experience in grant funding, I know that you will know these quite well, but bond funding opportunities page is very good. If you type in bond funding opportunities on Google, you will probably have that as the first result. Bond is the international development sort of network in the UK, and they have a page on their site where they list all the open funding calls. So, and there's lots out there, but what I would do is probably use the kind of the Shift F, when you're kind of the search option on your internet browser, and then type in medical or health, and then it will sort of take you to those calls where it's related to your work. Then also check out 360 Giving. It's a grant giving kind of open source platform. Some of it is paid, but I think there's like an unpaid search option as well. 360 Giving. And then obviously there are so many more, but the one that I tend to go to is just your simple Charity Commission advanced search. Charity Commission is the list of all the registered charitable organizations. And if you filter by grant-making trusts, you will be able, and also by country, region, and amounts that they give, I think is also one of the filtering options. You should be able to find a sort of a decent list that you can also start researching. Charity Excellence Framework is a new platform that you can check out. They also have a directory of different funders and funding calls. Right. Timeline. This one's very simple. But timeline is very important once you have all the other elements in place. It's a sort of it's a very linear order, right? You have your case for support, you've developed your opportunities, you have thought about your different networks, you have done your research, you know what income streams you're going to have, develop a timeline of opportunities, think of, and yeah, that's the next slide. What's the list of different opportunities? Thanks, Ali. This is very helpful. Thank you. You know, if you can think of any more or need a kind of a full list, I'll try and share as much as I can, but check the Charity Boost website. I'll mention that at the end. I will be putting more blog posts out there with some funding directories to check out. Develop a timeline. Think about what are your key opportunities? When are you planning to approach them? And also when you expect the money to come in. You know, if there is no information about how long it takes for them to make a decision, which is more so with smaller funders, you just don't know, give it at least 4 to 6 months. So submit a proposal, and then if you get the grant, it's likely to come in between 4 to 6 months, again, unless they meet 4 times a year, and in which case it might be quicker. Think about the amount you want them, you want to ask them to give you, and also, you know, as I said, have the clear dates, at least sort of an indication as to when you would expect that money to come in. So once you have all those other elements in place and have your opportunities, list them in a spreadsheet, and you will have the pipeline spreadsheet that I'll share with you. Once the pipeline's in place, the timeline, think about tailoring your proposition. So this is my favorite part as a fundraiser. You know who you are, you know your budget, you know what you're trying to do, and also you have a funder. This is when you want to start thinking about how do I match what they are interested in with what I do. So this is sort of an example that I tried to put together for you. Let's say a fund is called Yellow House Trust, and they list on their website that they're interested in community development, small charities only. So they explicitly say that they are only interested in supporting smaller organizations. They are themselves and pride themselves in being volunteer run. They also talk about the importance of the costs of supporting the costs of administration. So they might say things like, we understand that charities need support to cover their running costs, and therefore we would be happy to consider funding a portion of that, let's say. They talk about being interested in tangible impact. So this mostly means that they're not so keen on advocacy, and sort of they want to really see how many people are getting the support, and what is that support that they're getting, and really seeing the tangible impact of that work. And that they're very interested in funding at least 80% of all project costs. This is where you want to start thinking about, how do I tailor what I do and the projects I have in place with what the fund is interested in? And I know that this is a very simplistic example, and sometimes it's much more complicated than this. But if your organization, and this is sort of on the right side, is made up of your administrative costs, and these are very small amounts, but administrative costs being around 15K every year, your community health project as a project on its own is about 5K every year. And your, let's say, doctor training project, another project that you have, is about 10K, the cost of it every year. Your total organizational costs are what, 30,000 pounds. You now need to think, which project do I put forward and how do I sort of create that good mix of different costs that they would be interested in funding this work. Now, they mentioned that they're interested in community development. So you most likely want to talk about the fact that you'll be supporting the community and how many people you'll be reaching and supporting, right? That's your tangible impact. You want to talk about, if you are, that you are volunteer driven as well. You're volunteer run. You're, you may not have a single paid staff member, and they would probably really appreciate that because they are so themselves. Talk about the fact that you're a small charity. You might want to talk, or a small partnership if you are. Talk about the fact that you're impact driven, because that's very important to them. You know, that you're all about, maybe scaling the work and reaching as many people as you possibly can, and then explaining what that impact looks for you as a partnership, as a project. Include administrative costs and talk about what those are and what you need support for. And also, because they're and if they are a smaller funder and they're interested in smaller charities, they will very much appreciate photography. So photos, case studies will be of interest to them. And sort of try and tailor each proposal that you write in the same manner. You know, what are the key elements that before you even start writing, ideally, draft sort of what are the 5 key points I need to make sure I really talk about in this proposal, so that it shines through to the funder, or explains very well who I am as a person. It's like having a personality and dressing to show your personality, right? So your proposal is your clothing. What do I look like? And usually there are different versions of this, but they say that funders usually take like, some say 30 seconds or up to 2 minutes to read a proposal. So you really want to use graphic design and use sort of, if you are putting a proposal on Canva or even on Word, think of what are the words that I want to put in bold. You know, do I want to change the color of any of the wording to really make it shine through? How do I position everything? Do I want the photo to come first and then the wording? And what are the key impact words I want to use? You know, instead of, as a good example would be, instead of using the word sensitize, which I absolutely hate, is the word sensitize the community on on an issue. I would use words like bring out the voices, strengthen the voices of, give the community a voice, or using words that are simple but that scream impact. That's the words that scream action. And so every time you write a proposal, it's very useful to give it to someone else to read through and give. I always give it to my partner. I would give him the proposal, print it out, give it to him for a minute, and then take it away and go, what did you learn from that proposal in that minute? And if he's not telling me all the things that I wanted to have in that proposal as the key elements, that means I need to shift the way it's put together, the way it reads, because it's not working. Right, and then the last bit, I left myself no time to talk about asking, which I said I was going to. It's really getting over your limiting beliefs. You're not, we say to ourselves, I'm not ready to ask yet. I don't have all the elements in place. Or what if they say no? I mean, that's the worst thing that can happen, is them saying no, really. What if I offend them? This is particularly with major donors. What if I offend them? What if I'm asking for it too much? What if it's not the right time? What if they're having a family emergency that I don't know about, and then I'm coming here with my asks? It's very sometimes very difficult to get over this, but I don't very often hear about cases of people being offended, unless you have really miscalculated how much they are able to support you with, and does not seem to happen very often. And also, being not ready, it's mostly in our heads. I think we always know what we're trying to do. It's just finding that time to sit down and write it, which having a plan will really help you with, and also being too busy. fundraising always comes as a priority for us. If I always tell my team, you need to send me case studies and you need to send me photos, because if I don't have those, we can't run this organization. So we all need to make sure we raise the money so that we can actually be here. Right, I think I'm going to stop here. There are a lot more things that I could talk about, but again, if you have any questions, I'm sure that Amy's going to mention that as well. But you're welcome to email me, but also use the Pulse platform to leave in the forum section, start a discussion, which I think I've started one already, but ask questions, get in touch. I'd be more than happy to have a more detailed conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Paola. I'd just like to say on behalf of THET and everybody here, that was really interesting, very useful, and really engaging as well, which I'm always thankful for in the Zoom era of things. So yes, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everyone for coming. We really hope this was useful. I'll be sending out a questionnaire sort of survey later. And it would be great if Paola and Thet could get some feedback on that and see how you felt about the session. So that would be brilliant if you could respond to that. And as Paola has said, she'll be starting a link on the Pulse platform that you can register to if you haven't already. It's full of loads of really insightful questions and starting of threads, etc. And that would be great if you have any questions for Paola after this, would be fantastic. So thank you, everyone. And the recording will also be available. So if you'd like to sort of flip back to anything, that would be great. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.